The Deadly Assassin.
Hey guys.
November of 2019. Alright, good to know. I'm sure there will be things that either of us will say that are identical to what we said in the original. And look how scarce the table is.
Yeah.
Back in the day. I was thinking actually today, is from our point of view, it doesn't look like there's too much stuff on the table. There's just one or two things. But because of the angle of the camera, it does look like just a ton of stuff. So, hey guys, it's Alex and Dad from 7th Hour Films back again with Doctor Who Classic. Last time around, we had The Hand of Fear. What was that one about?
A very interesting script, another one of those that seem to have two separate stories. The Doctor and Sarah Jane land in a quarry that's about to be blown up. There's a little sequence before that where some weird alien is being executed by being blown to bits. Anyway, Sarah Jane is buried in the rubble, but as she's getting out, there's a calcified hand, which turns out to be part of the alien who blew up, millions of years ago. And it takes control of her, and she goes into a nuclear facility there in southern England and manages to get the hand irradiated so that it grows the remainder of the alien back, I guess like a lizard grows its tail back or whatever. In this case, it's the tail growing the lizard back. Anyway, turns out to be a very interesting alien, and the Doctor comes in and says, hey, wait a minute, maybe we can help you get back to where you were, because the alien explains she was trying to save her people. But when they take her back to her planet, it has, been millions of years, obviously. Things have all gone completely to hell. And the woman metamorphosizes into a man who is, I'm going to take back the planet. And anyway, they manage to get through a series of booby traps, get him back into the chamber, only to find out his own people, even after he had been blown up, figuring he might come back someday, essentially allowed themselves to go out of existence, and they trap him on the lonely planet with no possible way of escaping. He falls down an abyss and, a bottomless hole, basically. And then the kicker, when they get back home, Sarah Jane decides that she's going to leave. The Doctor says she's only kidding, but then he gets a call from the Time Lords that he has to come back, and says he can't take her to Gallifrey. So he says, I'll take you home, put you right back on the spot where you need to go. He drops her off, and of course it's the wrong spot, and she laughs and walks away.
That's like the most concise recap we've ever had.
But it was a very tight story. I was really impressed by how well there didn't seem to be any real major padding to it. I mean, it was 4 episodes, and every episode had a major piece of action in it.
Yeah, and Eldrad was a very interesting villain. So, for a while playing a villain, then kind of playing sympathetic, and then you realize, oh, wait a minute, they're actually trying to take over the galaxy and stuff. So, yeah, really interesting stuff all around. This time around, we are rewatching The Deadly Assassin, which we watched towards the end of 2019.
It's almost 3 years ago.
Yeah, so this one will be interesting. I remember this one being really good.
Yeah.
And afterwards, I did post on Twitter for a Q&A for this video, so we'll be answering some questions there. So, The Deadly Assassin, a companionless episode, if I recall correctly.
Yeah.
And yeah, very interesting one. And also the return of an old foe, the Master. And I'm curious to see how this works now in context. Because, before it was just the Master. He's back. But now, this is the first time we've seen the Master since the last Roger Delgado performance. Yeah. So I'll be very curious how they work that in. And of course, because it's years later, we don't really remember a lot. So so we'll half be watching this brand new and absorbing new information and everything. So yeah. Think anything else?
Well, I do want to take a moment just to tell everyone that just 2 days ago, we note the passing of Queen Elizabeth II of the United Kingdom. Of course, I lived in England for 3 years back in the 1960s when she was still on the throne back then. And, despite what a lot of people say about the British government, the American government, French government, German, whatever, the integrity of that woman by herself. She was a wonderful person, and I sympathize with the people of Great Britain in the loss of their monarch.
Well, yeah, I did see that. Didn't she have the longest reign
of a British monarch? Yes. Now there are those who basically would say, I think there are two people. One was an Egyptian pharaoh who essentially reigned for like 90 years, but he became pharaoh at the age of 4. So, I mean, he didn't really rule. And then I want to say that there was a French monarch who ruled for 72 years. And again, don't quote me on that. It's been years since I've studied French history. But theoretically speaking, she, I think, has the longest actual reign of actually, being an adult and reigning over her kingdom and essentially the empire at the beginning and the Commonwealth later than anybody else in world history.
And the now King Charles, isn't it that he broke the record for the oldest man to take the throne?
Yes. I think before him, Queen Victoria's son, maybe Edward, would have held the longest after that. But yeah, Charles was invested as Prince of Wales in, I want to say 1969. It may have been earlier than that. But yeah, he's only 3 years older than I am. So, yeah, he's been waiting quite some time. But all of that time has essentially given him, let's hope and pray, the ability to learn what he needs to do, not just to reign as a king in his own right, but to follow his rather remarkable mother.
Yeah, and keep up those vitamins if you want to go even, I guess, a fifth as long as her reign. So, but anyway,
well, if he lives as long as she does, he could rule a little over 20 years. So
that's something. So, anywho, but yeah, I did think about that too. Before we started, I was like, well, this is the British show. I feel like we have to discuss the British news. So,
and one last thing, and I'm just throwing this in because I can't tell you everything just yet. But after we closed Cyrano de Bergerac, I did something I haven't done in several years. I went out and auditioned for a show, and I actually got cast. The cast has not been announced yet, so I can't announce anything other than in about 3 or 4 weeks, I will be starting rehearsals for a show that will go up in November and December.
I just thought, they have told you're allowed to say that, right?
To say, well, yes, that I am cast, but again, the theater has not announced the cast yet, so by the time this airs, they will probably have done that, and whenever they tell me I can announce it, I will announce it.
Yeah. Well, I was just thinking, I was like, oh, geez, I hope you don't get in trouble for this, but then I thought, yeah, no one's going to watch this. I mean, the people across the pond are going to watch this, and I don't think you guys are rats.
I think they will be very interested. This is what they in theater call a bucket list role. Something that I've been wanting to do literally for 50 years. So,
Anywho. Now, let's get straight into The Deadly Assassin. Here we go.
Through the millennia,
Oh, God.
the Time Lords of Gallifrey led a life of peace and ordered calm, protected against all threats from lesser civilizations by their great power. But this was to change. Suddenly and terribly, the Time Lords faced the most dangerous crisis in their long history.
Why do I not remember that?
I don't either.
That feels like something you remember. This strange 70s movie intro.
The Panopticon.
If I didn't know better, Castellan, I'd swear it was a Type 40.
It is.
But that's impossible. There are no Type 40s in service. They're out of commission. Obsolete.
Obsolete? Twaddle, take no notice, my dear old thing.
Nevertheless, Commander.
Commander Hillred, Sector 7.
Malfeasance, Hillred.
Malfeasance.
The occupant of your Type 40 is a convicted criminal. Approach
Oh, no.
with caution.
Oh, fountain pen. I love fountain pens.
A fluffed pillow. Genius.
The tribunal chose, in view of extenuating circumstances, to impose a lenient sentence.
What?
The tribunal chose...
What sentence?
Oh, I beg your pardon. Banishment to Earth.
Oh, I guess he was convicted.
In Butter Sparrow. The sentence was subsequently remitted at the intercession of the CIA.
Celestial Intervention Agency. They get their fingers into everything. Is he mixed up with them?
There's nothing further on the file.
Oh, yes. They'd see to it that there wouldn't be. Can you get me his extract biog?
Yes, certainly. But take a moment.
Is that the first time the CIA is mentioned?
I think so.
And he signed it over the Pridonian seal.
Apparently he is, or was at one time, a member of that noble chapter.
How can you tell?
Well, the biog data extracts of Time Lords are color-coded according to chapter.
I didn't know that.
No? Well, your duties usually involve you with more plebeian classes, don't they, Castellan?
A Pridonian renegade, huh? I have to refer this to Chancellor Goth.
Don't know that we've heard Pridonians either.
No, I don't think so.
Now, where's the local news program?
Around me, in these high galleries of the Panopticon, already the Time Lords are gathering, donning
Very much a BBC-type announcer.
Well,
I probably said that 3 years ago.
As His Supremacy leaves public life, is who will he name as his successor?
Oh, no. It's Runcible. Runcible the Fatuous.
In a moment, I have...
Thank you, Runcible. Good day.
No, wait, sir, please. If I could ask you a few questions.
Runcible, you had ample opportunity to ask me questions during your misspent years at the Academy. You failed to avail yourself of the opportunity then, and it is too late now. Good day.
aw, poor Runcible.
I'm afraid Cardinal Barusa cannot, at this present moment of the time band, commit himself.
I seem to remember the name Barusa from the Five Doctors. Okay. I guess that's transducting. Oh, thank goodness, there's plenty of disguises here.
Isn't this the museum? Isn't that what the
Oh, maybe.
what Spandrel said, or the president?
So he is within the capital. Make certain he dies very quickly.
Well, it's different. I love that his hair doesn't fit in there.
Is there something the matter?
No, just a twinge in the knee.
Well, if you will lead such a rackety life. Have you had a facelift?
Several so far.
Alrighty then.
Bernard Horsfall. We've seen him just recently in something. Don't remember what, but
Yeah. Never remember what, but... Alrighty. Well, I've already written, like, more notes than I would for a part one. We've already seen this episode.
But again, a lot of new stuff here that we know comes out later on. I mean, the Celestial Intervention Agency, the whole hierarchy of the Gallifreyans, because he keeps saying Gallifrey instead of Gallifrey, so maybe that's just me, us, because we've always heard it as Gallifrey. Anyway, are there no female Time Lords? Because everybody in this episode so far has been a male.
There should be, I think. I don't know if maybe they just didn't do that back then, or... I don't know. I'm sure, like, a retcon explanation is just they're not on those lives yet, but I mean, there are female Time Lords. I suppose I don't know of many that are too prominent. The problem is there's not many Time Lords in modern Doctor Who anyway. So, like, there's the occasional that there's one regeneration of the Master that's actually a woman, and I know somewhere down the line in Classic Who, there's another renegade Time Lord known as the Rani. But yeah, as of this moment, no, I don't think there are any women Time Lords. At least not in this episode that I remember. So yeah. But very interesting stuff. I like how they always talk about the Type 40 being obsolete. It's like it's essentially, I don't even know like how would you describe this, as like a guy who, I don't know, works for the government or something, and he went to the president's garage, took like a really, really classic car, like an old 60s Mustang or something, and he went rogue, and they've been trying to get back to him ever since. But I guess that's not even a good enough like analogy, because at least there are people that have classic, 60s Mustangs and stuff. This is like if you took a weird car from the 50s that nobody wanted.
A Studebaker or a Nash Rambler or something.
Yeah.
But he did say it was in good shape, which is kind of funny because several of the commenters have said that the old TARDIS literally fell apart.
Yeah.
It literally fell down around Liz Sladen and Tom Baker's head when they were coming out of it at some point. So
yeah, so it is.
But, I'm also kind of surprised they didn't say why does it look like a box? Because it's supposed to have the chameleon circuit, and they would know that.
Yeah. Now, granted, there's also, if I remember right, because when they, whatever they said, transducted or whatever to the museum, you do see next to it a grandfather clock. And if I remember correctly, I think that's supposed to be the Master's TARDIS. Yeah. So, yeah, I guess maybe they're not even like questioning like, because it's so old, they're just sort of assuming that's why it's in that form. But you're right, it's like it is supposed to, if it has a fully functioning chameleon circuit, it should have just blended in on Gallifrey.
Yeah.
Or I guess even on Gallifrey, it would have just reverted back to its original form, which is just the cylinder with a door in it. So yeah, but very interesting. Already, like a lot of interesting characters, and it's also interesting to watch Tom Baker without a companion, because while this all has been really good, I will say, like, half of his lines don't have to be there. Those lines are only there to inform the audience of something that's happening.
Yeah.
And those lines would normally be questions by the companion. So I can already see that it's like, all right, you tried this out once, you're going to need a new companion next episode, though. So it just doesn't work out on this show.
I may have mentioned this before, but when the stairs come down, walking down the stairs, then onto a raked platform, a tilted platform, especially for an older man wearing that incredibly stiff costume, I bet they were making sure he walked very, very slowly, because that would have been awkward at the very least.
Well,
an election must be held within 48 hours.
But that is a separate matter.
No, Cardinal! The Time Lords must not be seen to be leaderless and in disarray. The assassin must be tried and executed before the election.
Why do you bother trying him if you've already pronounced him guilty and to be executed?
Well,
tried and executed. Notice he's already guilty.
Yeah. Well, you gotta look like you have due process.
You still think I did it?
I think you're going to be executed for it. They are preparing the vaporization chamber now. You have about 3 hours to live, Doctor.
What? Well, that's monstrous. Vaporization without representation is against the Constitution.
You are an embarrassment.
Well, that's beside the point.
Has the accused anything to say before sentence is pronounced?
Yes. Article 17.
Article 17?
I offer myself as a candidate for the presidency. It says in part that no candidate for office shall in any way be debarred or restrained from presenting his claim.
The guarantee of liberty does not extend to murderers.
As a jurist, Chancellor, I must point out that until the accused is pronounced guilty, he is protected by Article 17.
He is abusing a legal technicality.
This is kind of a weird thing, that you're in the middle of trial and it's like, I'm going to run for president, therefore you cannot do anything.
Theoretically, that's what a certain former president is counting on. that he can declare himself a candidate for President of the United States before all of these legal entanglements catch up to him. But I don't think that can happen. I don't think there's anything in the Constitution that protects you from the law.
And see, this is called science fiction, so...
And I must destroy the Time Lords. Nothing else matters. Nothing.
You know, it's kind of a weird choice that after your actor died, you went with a walking corpse for the character.
Just wanted to check it. See that symbol at the end of the corridor?
What about it?
You try and hit it.
What?
Go on, you try and hit it.
It's the kind of vandalism we're always running the Shibookans in for.
You know that apart from myself, he is the only other candidate in this election.
Is that so?
A murderer and a renegade. It exposes the highest office in the land to ridicule. Well, my first action as president will be to have Cardinal Baruza draft an amendment to Article 17. I shall see that this sort of thing never happens again.
So which one's the murderer and which one's the renegade? I forgot about the white line.
Matter condensation, particularly a nasty sort of death.
No wonder we couldn't find him.
I've never seen anything like it.
I have, I'm afraid.
You have?
Yes. It's a technique the master picked up somewhere on his travels.
Who is the master? I want to know if all you can tell me about this master. And I warn you now, if there is some private feud between you, do not try to settle it on Gallifrey.
It cannot be avoided. Like it or not, Gallifrey is involved, and I'm afraid things will never be quite the same again. Shall we go down?
It's so weird that they don't know of the Doctor and the Master yet. It's also just weird that shrinking people is just a thing the Master does.
Clever usage of the title sequence. Oh, look, we're in a quarry.
But a mind quarry. I like that going into the Matrix gave him his scarf back.
Indiana Jones.
That scarf is ridiculous.
Samurai warrior.
Whoop. Nope.
You were a fool, Doctor.
Alrighty. That's part 2. If I remember correctly, when they talk about he must have a lot of Artron energy, I think, at least they explain later, that Artron energy, I think, is like the energy of the TARDIS itself. And the reason that he would have so much is because he actually uses a TARDIS, unlike the rest of these Time Lords that just sort of stand around and do nothing. So, because I remember that gets brought up again, because like every passenger in the TARDIS has that sort of residual Artron energy, I think. I don't know how canon that is to this, but that's at least the explanation later.
Yeah.
So, you know, I know that we've watched a lot of good episodes recently, but is it me or is this really good?
Yeah. Now, again, right at the end there, the various iterations, the World War I doughboy in his gas mask and the horse in the gas mask and the alligator that wasn't there and a samurai. That's all just a little bit confusing, but I'm sure it's all leading to, some logical conclusion here.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's basically just the Master tormenting him within the Matrix, so...
It seemed to me that would have made more sense if it had been different things from various stories that we've seen in the last, 12 seasons, whatever season we're on now.
Yeah, we're on 14
now.
All
right.
Yeah, it might have been interesting because, I mean, there's no shortage of Master episodes, so you could have brought stuff from those episodes specifically. Yeah. So,
But yes, you're right. It's still a very intriguing story.
Yeah. I like the horse gas mask. It's kind of funny. It makes sense, but... Oh yeah, I forgot about the clown. Well, anyway. Enough about that.
You've no doubt seen the meme, Pennywise down in the sewer, saying, "Come down, we have pumpkin spice here."
Is pumpkin spice actually good? Have you ever tried it? Me either.
I mean, I eat pumpkin cookies, pumpkin pie,
Well, yeah.
but since I don't drink coffee, I don't need pumpkin spice in my coffee.
Yeah. Me either.
Homage to Alfred Hitchcock's North by Northwest here. I'm sure I said that before.
Probably. I'll check the footage and see. Oh no, he got hit with a mind bullet. Oh yes, mind water. Oh, you know how I said, wow, this is a really, really good episode? Yeah, it's sort of gone down. Is he trying to poison the water supply?
Yeah.
From that gross pond that exists that no person in their right mind would drink from?
It's been almost 4 minutes. How long can a living mind exist in there?
No data available.
It's only been
His
4
body's
minutes.
on the point to collapse now. The doctor can employ all his own Ultron energy for defense.
Get back! Get back!
Oh, good job.
Now, if I recall from 3 years ago, this last sequence was widely criticized by the woman who criticized Doctor Who for being too violent because
yeah,
he gets knocked down under the water.
Well, oh jeez, I don't remember him catching on fire.
Finished. You're finished.
Alrighty. Man, why don't we decide presidential elections like this? Who do you think would win in a fight in a swamp?
Both of those men are in their late 70s.
Yeah. I think I'd put a little bit more money on Joe Biden though. In a fight, it'd be the most hilarious thing on God's green earth. Yeah. But, oh boy,
Biden is in slightly better shape, but Trump's probably got 50 pounds on him.
Well, yeah. So yeah. Well, it's not bad. I can understand if people like it, but
the problem with that episode was that it was so prolonged. If they had managed to cut about 5 minutes, maybe 5 to 10 minutes out of it, and get some more stuff with the with Spandrel, the Castellan, and the old librarian there, just something to intersperse it, because we had the airplane, you had the samurai, you had all these great things, but they just were drawn out to the point where we went, okay, we get it, can we move on? And again, other than right there at the end when the assassin is revealed to be Chancellor Goth, or whoever he was, Goth.
Yeah.
There wasn't any major suspense.
Yeah. I mean, it's for a mind fight, it's also just kind of weird that it's a mind fight where you're being hunted in a forest and good luck. That's not something I would have thought of. It could have been interesting if, it was sort of, all these different things are happening, but they're all in that sort of a fight,
And your thing about didn't remember him catching on fire. How did the Doctor start a fire in the water? I mean, there was no setup for that.
I think what it was supposed to be was that the gun set it on fire. That's a lot of fire for one gunshot.
Yeah. But there was no setup about, there's oil in the water or there's some kind of flammable liquid. There's nothing that showed the Doctor did it. Maybe he knew that there was, or, he could have, just sniffed it and went, there's an oil leak here. Or it's just something to set it up a little bit better, because when he fires off the gun and suddenly bursts into flames, it's like, where did that come from?
Yeah, so it's all right. And I guess it's on top of the fact that you have this really interesting murder mystery, even though we already know who did it. It was the Master. But it's this interesting murder mystery. Even the twist that it's Guff is pretty interesting. You have all this stuff on Gallifrey, and then it's like, all right, we're going to take the next 25 minutes to have Tom Baker walk around a forest for a little while. And it's like, okay, you didn't, like, even if it was just, like, half the episode, he gets out, then the other half of the episode was more stuff on Gallifrey. That'd probably be all right.
Yeah.
So it really slows down this story, basically.
Yeah.
Why'd you stop? Oh man, that one stick was enough.
What was his plan, Goth?
Met him on Tesserus. He was dying. No more regeneration possible.
No answer to a straight question. Typical politician.
Before he could escape, Chancellor Goth tracked him down and killed him, unfortunately perishing himself in the exchange of fire. Now that's much better. I can believe that.
You're making Goth into a hero?
If heroes don't exist, it is necessary to invent them. Good for public morale.
And the Doctor's part in all this?
Best forgotten. Of course, Doctor, the charge against you will be dropped.
Okay.
Conditional on your leaving Gallifrey tonight.
Somehow, Cardinal, I don't want to stay.
Good.
Today we tend to think of Rassilon as the founder of our modern civilization, but in his own time he was regarded mainly as an engineer and an architect.
Now Rassilon found the Eye of Harmony, which balances all things, that they may neither flux, nor wither, nor change their state in any measure. And he caused the Eye to be brought to the world of Gallifrey, wherein he sealed this beneficence with the great key.
What's the great
Then the
key?
people rejoiced.
It's an epauleite rod carried by the president on ceremonial occasions.
Spandrel, we've been fooled. What? The Master. He's still alive.
So it happens he was only mostly dead.
I've seen worse.
That sash is a technological masterpiece. It protects its wearer from being sucked into a parallel universe. All he needs now is the great key, and he can regenerate himself and release a force that will obliterate this entire stellar system.
Yes! And the president was wearing it when he was shot down! The sash won't protect you! It's damaged!
That's a good point, actually. It's not the greatest fight the two of them have ever had.
Gallifrey has never known such a catastrophe, such devastation. What will we say?
Well, you'll just have to adjust the truth again, Cardinal. What about subsidence owing to a plague of mice?
As I believe I told you long ago, Doctor, you will never amount to anything in the galaxy while you retain your propensity for vulgar facetiousness.
Yes, sir.
Look, the Master.
Where do you think they're heading?
Out into the universe. And you know, I have a feeling it isn't big enough for the two of them.
Alrighty.
Wonder who plays the Master. Peter Pratt.
Okay.
So the Cardinal is now in charge, or is he going to run for election? Or
I assume they were already going to have an election, so I guess he probably runs. And actually, yeah, because Barusa, I'm pretty sure that's the villain in the Five Doctors, who's trying to get the power of Rassilon or something again. So I think at that point he was president. So I find it interesting that this political structure has a president and a chancellor.
That's not terribly unknown, because there are a lot of places in Europe, for example, that have both a president and a prime minister.
Really?
Yeah, it's kind of a balancing act.
I thought it was a sort of either-or situation.
In many places it is, but there are some places where they have both. For example, now don't quote me on this, but I think Germany has both a president and a prime minister. The prime minister is the one who actually runs the government. The president is more of a ceremonial position. But again, don't quote me on any of that.
Well, at that point, that honestly just sounds like, well, now the King of England.
Yeah, it's a ceremonial type job.
Yeah.
And usually not hereditary that I know of.
Although I hear that I was watching a compilation of Top Gear clips where they were talking about the Queen, and there was one where they said, the Queen has the constitutional power to declare war on any country, but she never does it. Not even when she's drunk after a party or something. Like, go on, Liz, declare war on France. So yeah, it's an interesting power that the British monarch would have. But anyway.
Now, one last little thing there is that if they had taken some of the action and some of the plot of that fourth episode and simply shifted it back to the third episode, that could have evened it all out.
Yeah, I would say so.
Overall, great story. Third episode kind of dragged.
Yeah, pretty much. I get it. I understand the point of the third episode, but at the same time, it does kind of drag. And once you get back to the whole thing with the Master and what he's trying to do and everything, it really ramps up a lot more.
And right there at the end, where Spandrel turns around and says, "Oh, look, the Master." I mean, I think he would have been a little bit more shocked. The Master, how, and he's starting to get away. And then, once he's gone, you can say, well, I don't think the universe is big enough for the two of them. But yeah, that seems just a little too, set. And it's like, oh, look, it's the Master. Oh, he survived. Anyway, go on with the notes.
All right, well, the first thing I wrote down was the intro with the text being read by the Doctor. That was kind of weird. Like, it almost makes me wonder if they sort of wanted this to be more movie-like, which I guess you could kind of watch this. Like, the only thing you need to know is the Doctor and the Master, and a bit about Gallifrey. But other than that, I guess you could sort of come into this and be like, oh, well, you don't need to know too much to really get this one. I guess. But you do kind of need an understanding of Time Lords and who the Master is and everything. But yeah, that was just sort of a weird... For some reason, this has a text intro read by the Doctor. But anyway.
What year was this?
This was 1976.
Okay, so it's like 2 years before Star Wars.
Yeah, so...
And George Lucas always said that they did that because they wanted to remind people of the old, like, Buck Rogers series back in the 40s and 50s.
Yeah, so an interesting choice. Again, I guess that's also to, just to catch anyone up, like, hey, this is, why the Doctor is going to Gallifrey. Because they set that up, but then, you just have to understand, well, the Doctor's going to Gallifrey, he doesn't have his companion, so, yeah, I don't know. It was fine, it was just sort of odd for the episode. And then, yeah, we had the Doctor's vision, which was, alright, so, trying to figure out everything on Gallifrey is a little difficult, because everybody has basically a print copy of their mind, and they use that to interpret the future, and they should have interpreted that they should have been able to forecast that the president was going to be assassinated, but they didn't because the Master took that forecast, intercepted it, and then beamed it into the Doctor's brain.
Yes.
I bet you this will never come up again on Gallifrey, that the Time Lords can do that.
Well, it's not that they can, it's just that after this particular episode, they've probably figured out, safeguards to prevent it from ever happening again.
Maybe, yeah. Well, and I'm trying to think, I guess there is a moment in modern Doctor Who where they show the end of the Time War, and it's like the last moments of the Time War, and they all kind of know, like, well, we know that it's all about to end, Gallifrey is going to be lost, the Doctor is going to do something, and they know what's going to happen, and in that moment, Rassilon, actually, who has been revived, figures out a way of taking Gallifrey out of the Time War at the end in order to survive. So I guess that's something. I don't know, but yeah, it seems like it does seem like a sort of odd thing of like, oh yes, we can predict when Time Lords are going to die, but obviously it just didn't work the one time. We should have known. So, and it's also interesting. So, does that also mean they can predict when a Time Lord will regenerate, or just when a Time Lord dies? Because there's also that question of regeneration, which honestly, like, I understand, now that I think about it, I understand regenerations for the rogue Time Lords who go out and go do things. There's a lot of dangerous stuff, so you have that regeneration as a backup, at least 12 times. But, honestly, why do the Time Lords on Gallifrey, who don't do anything, why do they need those? I mean, it's politicians trying to extend their lives, and there will be, things later on of why, how regenerations came about and stuff, and why it was specifically limited to 12 regenerations and stuff. But at the same time, it's like, they already live for a long time, because the first Doctor, before he even was granted any regenerations, he lived, 400 or 500 years or so. So, yeah, I guess I just answered my own question, though, if it's politicians trying to stay alive for as long as they can. So, like that one Time Lord, they said, oh, yeah, he served as president for 900 years. Now, that's quite a long time for any sitting president. So, it makes you wonder how long the last president served. I don't think that was the same one they were talking about. Well, and I said that it is slightly awkward not having a companion, because there are, there's times where the Doctor says something and it's like, I don't think he would have actually said something here, but he's saying that for the audience. But I will say that if you're not going to have the standard companion, the Castellan was a really good fill-in.
I was thinking there at the end, that was seriously, since Tom Baker is not the grumpy old man like Hartnell had been.
Yeah.
Even if the Castellan had no real Time Lord powers, put him in as a companion, because he would be, the Watson, basically, to Tom Baker's Holmes. Yeah. Whereas you got the Master as Moriarty. This would be, a grumpy old man and a young man with full vitality. It just would have been a great thought.
It is also that sort of thing, because he's not like a real higher up Time Lord. He's the head of the Chancellor's Guards, basically. But even then, he doesn't know a whole lot. He doesn't know science or these mathematics and stuff like that, and the Doctor does. So that would have been very interesting as a sort of Watson character. And it kind of reminds me of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. when they had the one Asgardian. I can't remember his name, but they had the one Asgardian, and you kind of look at him and it's like, oh, this guy's an Asgardian, really? And it's like, well, yeah, he's like a commoner in Asgard. It's like, yeah, they don't all look like Chris Hemsworth, he's an average guy. He is incredibly strong, when compared to all the humans there. But yeah, he's obviously not like Thor, and you could sort of have that here. It's like, it's interesting to see somewhat more common life on Gallifrey, especially for Time Lords. Yeah. So, because that is also, they kept talking about, oh, well, we have to have the correct story for the people so that they don't, have any distrust in Time Lord rule. And it's like, we don't really see too much of like Gallifreyans as opposed to Time Lords.
But Barusa was just a wonderful character, and the actor did a great job there, because again, that is very much what a lot of politicians do. We have to tell the story that the public needs to hear, not the story as it truly is. It's what they did with The Dark Knight. Harvey Dent has to be a hero, otherwise everything that he worked for before he went insane, spoilers, will be for nothing. So yeah, in this one they're saying, all right, Doctor, we're going to cover this up, so you get lost now and never bother us again.
Yeah, and the Doctor is more than happy to leave.
Yeah.
So it's the reason he left in the first place, pretty much. So, and I do like that as well, seeing some of his interactions with people he knew at the Academy, Barusa being one of his teachers, and what was the reporter's name? Runcible. Yeah, just this other guy who didn't really make much of himself. So,
Runcible, and now again, I have no idea if this has any bearing on it, but this is right about the time of Monty Python's Flying Circus. And they used to lampoon the British reporters, especially the BBC reporters, all the time. And the way that Runcible was talking is a lot like the way that the Python used to portray these reporters.
Yeah.
So, that was just a fun little bit there, because not only did the Doctor think that Runcible was an idiot, all of the professors at the Academy went, "Oh, Runcible, yes, you didn't amount to anything, did you?" So, it's just a fun little bit there.
Yeah. Now, it's also interesting because they talk about these people that the Doctor knew at the Academy, but they don't really emphasize that the Doctor went to the Academy with the Master as well. So I thought that you could start to do that a bit. Because I feel like there were some hints at that between the Third Doctor and Roger Delgado, where it's like, oh, they kind of knew each other. Maybe they were friends at one point, but they really didn't go for that at all in this one.
Now, why was the Master, looking like he had, been barbecued? Did they ever explain that? Was it just because he was at the end of his last regeneration and his body was starting to deteriorate? But there was never any outright saying, why does he look like this?
There was a slight hint at that, because they do say he's at the end of his regeneration. He's trying to restore his body and regenerate more. I think the main theory is that the Master that we saw with Roger Delgado, he was the last of his original cycle, and perhaps, like, the theory is that basically he tried to regenerate again. He tried to defy it and force a regeneration, but what it ended up doing is just completely destroying his body. Yeah. So he was still alive, but he was just completely unrecognizable.
And I'm really kind of surprised, too, that they didn't get someone who could match Delgado's Master laugh and the way of speaking and everything a little bit better, too.
Yeah, because it is supposed to be, at least according to that theory, and from what I can tell on this episode, too, it's supposed to be the same body. It's just horribly, destroyed, but it's supposed to be the exact same body. Again, thinking about it now, it's kind of a weird choice that it's like, the reason you're having to get a different actor is because the original actor died. Yeah. And, they waited. It's been a number of seasons since they had the Master. But their idea in bringing him back was having this charred, rotting corpse-like body, and it's like, he's back, and it's like, the man did die, like, and in a car crash it was horrible and everything. Like, that's an odd choice. Yeah. So, like, I know we had the whole thing of whoever being outraged of the cliffhanger being the Doctor drowning. I'm wondering if there was anything about that. I feel like we would have been told about that, so I'm going to say probably not. Yeah. But it is just sort of an odd choice. I'm sure they'd never intended that. They were just like, oh, well, let's bring back the Master, but do we have a different guy? Do we just go with a different regeneration? What do we do? And someone probably just came up with that of like, oh, well, we could just have him, sort of a walking skeleton sort of thing with just giant bug eyes, too. The eyes were a little distracting, but it was fine. honestly, I don't know how often the Master comes back in the Fourth Doctor's era. I don't know. I don't know of any episodes. I feel like he might. I know that he'll definitely come back with the Fifth Doctor, because then he'll get an actual new body, still very close to the original look, but yeah, I don't know. I don't know if the charred, gooey Master, looking like a burnt marshmallow, is going to come back. So, but we'll see. Let's see. We did also get more of the CIA and the Prydonian chapter that the Doctor was a part of, which is interesting. A lot of just decent lore in this one about the Time Lords and everything, and especially at the end with Rassilon and the Sash and the Eye of Harmony and everything, which, I mean, I guess it makes sense that the Eye of Harmony doesn't make sense, because, like, alright, it's this thing that's on Gallifrey, and it powers everything. I think it powers all the TARDISes, but also they'll show, at least later, which I guess could be sort of a retcon, that every TARDIS has an access to the Eye of Harmony as well. Because there's one episode where the 11th Doctor is going through the TARDIS, and pretty much like at the core is the actual Eye of Harmony.
Wasn't the Eye of Harmony one of the big plot points of the movie? The 95, 96 movie, whatever it was.
Yes.
Yeah,
it was the Master.
Roberts.
Yeah.
What was his name?
Eric Roberts?
Eric Roberts, yeah. Wasn't he trying to steal the Eye of Harmony or do something with it?
I think it was like he needed the Eye of Harmony to swap his body with the Doctor's. Because that was the thing. The Master doesn't make any sense. But that was the thing, was that he had taken on a human body, and he was trying to take the Doctor's body in his remaining regenerations. So yeah, I don't know. I don't know, like, at what point, because I think at some point he'll just get a new body, a new Time Lord body with new regenerations, and just take over that. So I don't know. And then, well, because that's also the thing, is that he does that, then they execute him, but he's alive. He possesses a human, and then he dies. He comes back later. So, because I think that was the thing when they brought him back in modern Doctor Who. He said that, well, the Time Lords revived me specifically because they needed me to be a warrior in the Time War. So I left and didn't fight in their Time War. So I think, or maybe there's an audio... I think there's an audio series of the War Master, and it stars Derek Jacobi as the Master. So yeah, I don't know. The whole thing is confusing. Nobody understands it, and especially now in the more recent iterations of the Master, we don't even know where they are on his timeline. Like, are they before? Are they after? Because we had a version of the Master, a female version of the Master, facing the 12th Doctor. She died after her past self killed himself. And then immediately with the 13th Doctor, we got a new Master. So nobody knows where any of these guys come in.
I'm not dead yet.
Yeah.
You're not fooling anyone.
The Master will never die. There might also be an audio of the first Doctor with the cast from An Adventures of Space and Time meeting another version of the Master. And the Monk. I know the Monk comes back in the audios. Why don't they bring the Monk back?
I like the Monk.
Yeah, bring him back in modern Doctor Who. Give the Master a rest for a little bit. Anywho. We had Article 17, which allowed the Doctor to run for president to delay his trial. So, and yeah, another sort of weirdly topical... ish topical. I mean, it worked on Gallifrey. Whether or not that'll work, in the US, I suppose, is left to be seen.
I think what the basic premise is now is, because of the Constitution and laws of the United States, you cannot indict or prosecute a sitting president. Before you can do that, if you have determined that the president has broken a law, the first thing you have to do is impeach and remove him from office, and then he can be prosecuted. I do not think that would apply to someone who is running for office. So, with all of the various lawsuits and criminal investigations going on, I don't know that that's going to save Mr. Trump at all.
Yeah. We need to get Legal Eagle on this. You ever seen Legal Eagle?
No.
He's a very interesting channel. I mean, he's a lawyer who basically he makes a bunch of YouTube videos, and he's been talking about a lot of this stuff, and it's a very interesting channel. He also reviews TV shows about lawyers and grades them on their accuracy and everything. And it's hilarious when he'll go through and be like, no, that's not accurate. You wouldn't do this. You wouldn't do that and everything. And then my favorite is apparently one of the most legally accurate shows on television is actually Better Call Saul. So, with the exception being don't do some of the things that Saul Goodman does, but what he does is technically accurate.
Yeah. That's the thing. You learn how to apply whatever laws that you can, even if it's in defense of something that's theoretically indefensible, it's still the law. If you can use the law to your advantage, that's what it's there for.
Yeah, so... but anyway, yeah, so Article 17 did protect the Doctor. I'm wondering if there will be any follow-up, like in a future episode of like, so who became the president? Was it Barusa? I mean, I guess he's just sort of the last guy left, unless Runcible runs for president. That would be hilarious. I also just want to know, like, what is a campaign on Gallifrey? Because I guess, although I don't fully understand this political system of, well, because the president died, like, they're doing an election, but that's only because he didn't name a successor. So that's a whole thing of, like, well, almost sort of Roman in a way of, like, with some of the later emperors of, like, well, they name their successor, even, it's not really hereditary, but they choose their successors, and it's like, well, that's weird. Why? I mean, it's strange that only once they're dead and nobody knows who the successor is, then you must hold an election for it. Yeah. So,
but I thought they said the election had to be held within 48 hours. That would be great to have a 2-day election season.
I can't remember. It must have been. It was either Canada or France. I can't remember which, but one of them where it's like the campaign is only like 78 days long. That must be nice.
Well, that's because, again, they have a parliamentary system rather than what we have. It's like Liz Truss, who was just elected as the new Prime Minister of England. Boris Johnson resigned. The people of United Kingdom did not elect Liz Truss. Her party won a majority of seats in Parliament, therefore the members of her party got together and said, hey, we got 4 or 5 different people that we could choose, and they ultimately winnowed them down to, I think, 2, and then she won the ultimate vote. So because her party was in charge of Parliament, and she is now being elected as the leader of the party, she becomes the Prime Minister.
Oh, okay. And
that would, talk about frightening. That would literally mean, if the Americans were doing that sort of system, that would mean that it would come down to Chuck Schumer, Mitch McConnell, Nancy Pelosi, and Kevin McCarthy.
I mean, not that choices have been great recently, but yeah, that sounds difficult.
Well, because the Democratic Party is currently in control of the House, and they technically have control of the Senate because of the Vice President, that would mean that the party would get together and elect either Chuck Schumer or Nancy Pelosi. Now, that being said, just because they are the current leaders doesn't mean that the Democratic Party wouldn't say, hey, you know what? Why don't we elect somebody who is in the party that's not necessarily in Congress? I mean, they could put in any of the people that ran, Pete Buttigieg or Michael Bloomberg, Bernie Sanders, somebody, although technically Bernie Sanders is not a Democrat, he's an independent.
Yeah.
But
it flops from year to year.
Yeah.
So
they could elect, theoretically, somebody other than Chuck Schumer or Nancy Pelosi. Just somebody who's in the party that gets the majority of votes in the party.
I mean, it's on the one hand, it's, an interesting sort of different way of doing that. And it's like, well, if it means there's not 1,000 times 1,000,000 campaign ads, It does sound kind of nice, you know? Because, I mean, what is it like? I mean, shouldn't we be coming up on when everybody starts announcing everything? Because
yes, usually it's about 18 months before the election, so supposedly sometime in the middle of next year. But a lot of people are already kind of lining up to explore a potential run after the midterms, which would be the first week of November. Yeah. So we got about 2 months, and then after the election and how that turns out, we'll start seeing more and more people who are forming exploratory committees and so forth.
You know what's nice? I don't look at the trending tab on Twitter anymore because I got so tired of it. And it's been so nice because I actually don't keep up with a lot of things. Like, if it's really important, it will pop up on my timeline. Like, someone I follow will talk about it. But I'm just so glad that with whatever next election is coming up, I'm not going to have that. You, on the other hand, you're insane, and you actually like watching the news.
Well, that's because, I spent 5 years at 2 different newspapers as a reporter. And, of course, having been a history teacher for nearly 3 decades, that's my thing,
Yeah.
History and politics.
Yeah, so I'm wondering, like, what does a campaign look like on Gallifrey? Like, I mean, hey, we had a news channel on Gallifrey, and it looks pretty similar to a British reporter. So I'd be very curious how that would work. So they could probably do like an entire spin-off of Gallifrey and politics, and it would probably sell, So, anywho.
Anyway, yes, because don't we have a Q&A to get to?
Oh, you're right. Yeah, and we're already at the 2-hour 20 mark, so the rest of the stuff is the mine hunt and stuff, the story, which we talked about, of creating a hero, and the lore drop about Rassilon and everything. So, okay, that's a good point. Let's move on to the Q&A. Give me 1 second to zoom this in so it's readable. Alrighty. We have a Q&A here. Let's go ahead and start off question number 1. What's your opinion on the Baker era so far? The tone and style, the level of horror and violence, the role of women under Holmes and Hinchcliffe. Yes.
Well, I like Tom Baker. Again, he's... I think I've mentioned this. Of the 4 that we've really covered so far, he would be second to me to William Hartnell. I'm partial to Hartnell simply because I was there at the beginning. Yeah. But I like the fact that he's quirky. He's I've mentioned again he's a Sherlock Holmes character to me.
Yeah.
He's a young man. He's got a whole different way of looking at things. The violence and horror don't bother me. By the 1970s, there was a whole bunch of stuff on television and in the movies that was much, much worse.
Yeah.
I don't feel it's gratuitous. And again, the role of women. I thought Liz was probably the best female companion since Barbara because she didn't take crap from anybody. You know? She was... she said literally in her very first appearance that she was a feminist. She's an independent woman. She's a reporter, a very well-known reporter, a very well-respected reporter, and therefore, even like when she went back to the Middle Ages, and there was, all of that stuff with the Sontarans, or the Sontaran, it was just her saying, hey, look, the life of a woman doesn't have to be the way it was 500 years ago. There are things that we can do that make our lives better. So I like the Tom Baker era probably at this point next to Hartnell.
Yeah. I would say I think my favorite has actually been the Pertwee era. I just thought that especially his dynamic with Unit I thought was really good. And there's a part of me that does miss that with Tom Baker. But at the same time, it is still really good. Tom Baker definitely reminds me of more modern doctors, very quirky, and interestingly, when he gets angry, like I'm reminded a lot of like Tennant getting angry in a lot of his episodes. So that works too as well. And the tone and style, there's a part of me that kind of wishes we had more of the Unit type stories because I thought those were really good, really tight. There were a lot of good characters, and you go into these interesting locations and stuff. And sometimes, yeah, even with a really, really good story, some of the locations are just like, that's all right. But, I mean, overall, I don't think we've had a single bad episode in Tom Baker's era, which is more than I can say for the Pertwee era.
Yeah.
So,
all right, thank you, Kieran.
Next up, who has been your favorite companion of the classic era so far? Well, we've had a lot of them at this point.
Well, again, Ian and Barbara are my favorites. Susan, not so much. I never really thought Susan worked, I guess, the way they thought. I mean, I guess she was the damsel in distress.
I mean, neither did she.
Yeah.
That's why she ended up leaving. She
Yeah.
wasn't really given much.
And again, Elizabeth Sladen.
Yeah, Sarah.
Sarah Jane. I like Leah Shaw. You know, that
yeah.
Although a lot of people say she's not really a companion, but you know, she worked. I like the fact that she could stand up to the Doctor because she was also a scientist.
Yeah.
So.
I would also throw in Jamie as
Yeah.
just a very reliable guy. Even, I mean, it's probably the best argument for bringing in a historical companion in any era, let alone the modern era. But definitely, like, just the fact that he was the muscle, even though he was, you know, slightly scrawnier than some of the previous muscle we've had. But he was always there. He would always help out as best he could. And he worked really well with Troughton.
Yeah.
So
and the good thing to me about Jamie was that his character grew. You know, he started off as this poor kid from the Highlands who got taken off literally on the adventure, not just of a lifetime, but of literally thousands of lifetimes. And his character grew and grew and grew until the very end, where they finally literally said, we're going to have to wipe your memory because we cannot send you back home with what you have learned.
Yeah, so...
All right, so that was the first one from Alex the Hunted.
Yeah. The next question is, what's been your favorite story of the Baker era so far? So I can go ahead and bring those up. We'll just sort of blast through them quick as can be. Thumbnails. So we had Robot.
It's okay.
Ark in Space.
Yeah, okay.
Sontaran Experiment.
I love the Sontaran Experiment because I loved the Sontaran.
Yeah. Genesis of the Daleks.
That was good.
Yeah. Revenge of the Cybermen.
Okay.
Terror of the Zygons.
Okay.
Planet of Evil.
Interesting. Very interesting.
Yeah. Pyramids of Mars.
Right up until the end.
Yeah. The Android Invasion.
I mean, nothing wrong with any of these.
Yeah, it was alright. The Brain of Morbius.
Very interesting.
Very interesting. The Seeds of Doom.
Yeah.
Yeah, Seeds of Doom, good. I kind of preferred the beginning to where it went, but overall, honestly, if it was a straight 4-parter, it probably would have been a lot better. But the Mask of Mandragora,
that was a really good one for me.
Yeah. The Hand of Fear,
that was also good.
Yeah, I guess that just leads us to today with the Deadly Assassin.
Well, again, the Sontaran Experiment.
That was the 2-parter with the other Sontaran.
So,
the original Sontaran, that was a 3rd Doctor episode.
Okay. But I still liked him.
Yeah.
So, Mask of Mandragora for me, then, given all of that.
Yeah, I'd probably say... Yeah, because there was never any sort of plotting. Like, I guess... Because some of this, like, you know, this episode we had... That 3rd episode, which it was fine, but it was like, all right, well, can we get back to Gallifrey and the murder mystery and everything? Yeah. But yeah, so Mask of Mandragora, like, from like pretty much beginning to end, was really, really solid, and a nice, interesting location. So, and even if it was in England, they really made it look not like England.
Yeah.
So, the next question is: you're both big Star Trek fans. How would you think races like the Daleks or the Cybermen or the Sontarans would be like in the Trek universe? Maybe the Daleks versus the Federation. Well, there is a comic, and I have the first two parts of it, where it's a crossover between The Next Generation and Doctor Who, specifically the 11th Doctor, and they show the Cybermen teaming up with the Borg. And honestly, at that point, you really start to realize how similar the Cybermen and the Borg are. So I think they would fit in. The Daleks I could see on the original series, and mainly just because of their design.
Yeah.
But races like the Draconians...
The Draconians, to me, were the most intriguing of all of the various races that we've seen so far.
Yeah.
And again, with the right sequel, I think the Sontarans, because they're just so incredibly weird.
Yeah.
You know, the Draconians, that's just a good, solid backstory that you could mine infinitely.
Right.
The Sontarans, just, especially that first one with the Third Doctor, I'm remembering that now. That, again, there's so much that you could do with the different Sontarans all coming together and going, no, we should do this, no, we should do that, and blowing each other up. Because that would give you not just here's a united front like the Klingons or anything. This would be all of the various Sontaran elements warring against each other and against the Federation.
The Sontarans are like they took away like points in height from Klingons, and then they dumped those points into like knowledge and science. So that sort of like what they lack in like just sort of brute strength, they make up for in like more scientific genius and everything. Yeah. So yeah, definitely Sontarans. Maybe I could also see an episode of Eldrad as well. So
yeah, the first iteration of Eldrad was very good.
Yeah,
I didn't like the guy, but
the only problem I could see with that, especially if it's on next, you might need to put it on a different show, because if you have the first iteration of Eldrad, Riker is definitely sleeping with that. So anyway,
thank you, Alex Hunted.
Next question. Are you enjoying Tom Baker's portrayal of the Doctor so far, and what aspect of his Doctor do you think do you enjoy or find interesting? Well, I pretty much as we said earlier, is the more Sherlock Holmes aspect to him, the more detective side.
Yeah.
So
he's both the Doctor, but he's also the detective.
Yeah, which is very different from the Third Doctor, which was very much a James Bond portrayal. Yeah. So.
All right, and Shaz, you have another question?
Which villains / monsters in the Fourth Doctor's era are your favorites? Again, Sontarans, the Draconians were still Third Doctor.
Yeah.
But Eldrad, the Mandragora, pretty much those. Alrighty. I'll ask a very predictable question. What are your impressions of Tom Baker as the Doctor, and how does he compare to his predecessors? Again, still holds up very much.
Yeah.
Second question relates to Sarah Jane. As the Fourth Doctor has had Sarah Jane since the start of his tenure, and they were such a brilliant and iconic pairing, is it hard to imagine him with any other companion, and do you think the companion that comes after Sarah Jane is up against it? Because even she worked well with the Third Doctor, but the Third Doctor very much works the best with Jo, I think. So having Sarah Jane and Tom Baker, I think that does work really well. And it will be we had a sort of a taste of not having Sarah Jane around, but we didn't really have any companion aside from the Castellan. But yeah, I think I have a vague idea of who comes next, and I don't know. I think it's going to be a little weird, but I mean, if they're up to it, then I think they'll be fine. But Sarah Jane was a really solid companion, especially for the Fourth Doctor.
Yeah, and since I don't know what's coming up, I really can't make any kind of prediction there.
Yeah. So hold on, we got a bit more. And what are your hopes for that companion? What kind of companion do you think they will be?
Well, I always like the companion to be a foil.
Yeah.
And again, that's what Ian and Barbara did at the very beginning, because they were going, what is going on here? Why are we doing this? This is just insane.
They questioned him a lot.
Yes. Which again, setting up the dynamic, they didn't hate the Doctor. They just said, you need to explain why you do these things, because we as teachers see this completely differently than the way that you do. Like when it came to the Aztecs and to the Romans and things like that. So, again, I like the fact that Sarah Jane was an independent woman. I never did understand what Ben and Polly brought to the Doctor. Again, Jamie stands out. Dodo, Vicky, Stephen, Victoria.
Well, yeah.
I mean, they're all okay, but they don't rise to the level of a Sarah Jane or an Ian and Barbara or Jamie.
Yeah. I will say, while Sarah Jane was very different from Jo, I would like to see something a lot more different than Jo and Sarah Jane, who were pretty sort of standard, young girl companions, even though they were very different from each other. So I would like something, a bit more of a foil, maybe someone who could hold their own a little bit more. There are way too many times when Sarah Jane got captured. I don't know, maybe throw in, let's have another warrior like Barbara. I don't know. So,
and the thing about Jo, I mean, she was good, but she didn't have the same relationship with Pertwee that Sarah Jane has with Tom Baker. She essentially, I mean, she wasn't meek by any means, but she didn't challenge the Doctor, in my opinion, the way Sarah Jane did Tom Baker.
Yeah. So, alrighty, we got 2 more questions on here. I think I'm right in saying you know nothing about the Fourth Doctor's era beyond this point. So what are you hoping for from the next companion? And I guess we can sort of use this as a what do we expect going into this new part of the Fourth Doctor's era?
Well, you know what I expect. I want more historicals. I know that's not going to happen.
Yeah.
But that's what the original Doctor was founded on.
Yeah.
You need to do more historicals. You need to do stuff putting the Doctor in situations that people are already familiar with, and to see how his appearance and his companion's appearance mucks that up somehow.
Yeah.
Putting them in the middle of the French Revolution, putting them in with Nero, putting them into the Doctor has to invent the Trojan horse because the Trojans are too stupid, or the Greeks are too stupid to do that for themselves. That's the stuff that I thrived on. And so when we get off into space, we get into the science fiction stuff of it. The Mandragora, again, love the Mandragora, because even though it had a science fiction element, it was set in a very specific time period.
Yeah.
And like you and I sat here and going, where's the Catholic Church? Where's the Inquisition?
Yeah.
But it was still enjoyable for what it was.
Yeah, definitely. And if you're not going to, I would kind of like to go like completely back to the first Doctor's era in terms of plots, where, because it was either historical or a completely alien planet, and I would like one or the other. And look, I know, and we're going to get some flack for it. I will, at least. I'll take the flack for it. But there's only so much of England I can deal with. Yeah. And if you're going to do England, make it interesting England. Like doing the maybe middle of London. Like, we haven't been there in a while. It's the countryside I'm tired of.
Go to Scotland, go to Wales, go to Land's End. I mean, go to the moors. There are so many wonderful places. I mean, even East Anglia, where I lived, it's not the greatest place in the world, but it's not the southwest of London down there on the south coast, which is where they apparently have filmed 75% of everything that they do outside of London.
Yeah. Well, even like last episode, when it's like, oh, we went to a nuclear power plant. Like, oh, that's different. Haven't been to one of those in a while. Like the Third Doctor would go there all the time. But it was like, oh, some like structures and like something visually interesting to look at. Not just a house or a couple houses in the middle of nowhere. It's
or
just
a quarry.
Yeah, so even quarries, I'm kind of like, well, you've been to a lot of quarries,
Last question from Alex the Hunted again.
Yeah. Everyone has their fan casting for the Doctor, but who would you cast as the Master? Oh, that's a really good question.
Now, hear me out on this.
Okay.
With the new Doctor coming up, and I know he would never agree to do this, what if they got Eccleston to come back as the Master?
Huh.
or for that matter, even Tennant or Matt Smith. But
yeah.
Christopher Eccleston coming back and the Doctor going, wait a minute, aren't you me? And he goes, no, Doctor, don't you recognize me? I'm your old friend.
Yeah, and I could see that happening because the Master would be that petty that would work into the story that the Master would try to take one of the Doctor's previous faces to mess with him specifically.
But again, you have to understand we are only familiar with really famous British actors at this point. Brian Cox, is he the guy who's doing Succession? Older man.
Yeah.
I just had another one too. Well, see if you can come up.
Let's see. Recent British. I'm not watching much British TV anymore, so yeah. Although, if you wanna also, I know it's probably heresy to try to name an American actor. Although they also did Eric Roberts, and everybody loved Eric Roberts. So, I mean, even just recently, like there's a lot of actors like on Prison Break or something that you could use for the Master. If you had like, I don't know, even if you had like Wentworth Miller, like that'd be kind of interesting for the Master.
Or let's do the gender swap. And again, I realize they would never do this, but if you're really thinking about it, get Helen Mirren, get Maggie Smith. These just incredibly wonderful actors. Judi Dench, get Daniel Craig for heaven's sake. Timothy Dalton, Pierce Brosnan. That's just for a lark. Say, hey, listen, we're not going to use you the entire season, but would you come in for like 2 episodes and just play the Master for us? Because I think that would shake up the Doctor Who world, kind of like the new casting has been.
Yeah.
And it would it would revive people's interest because they go, now wait a minute, what would bring, Helen Mirren to come in and play the Master on Doctor Who?
Yeah. The other obvious sort of British choice would probably be Tom Hiddleston. But I mean, at that point, that he doesn't even need to put much into that. It's just playing Loki again. It would actually be interesting to have a future iteration of the Doctor played by Tom Hiddleston and have him play sort of more the good guy. The one thing, because you brought up Timothy Dalton, they can't use Timothy Dalton because they already used him at the end of the 10th Doctor's era as Rassilon. So
Anthony Hopkins.
Yeah, that would also be really interesting.
Again, although I don't think he's British. F. Murray Abraham, the guy who played Salieri in Amadeus. He's much older now, but again, he's just got that look about him that he's literally almost reptilian in the way he looks now and the way he plays villains now.
Charles Dance. I don't know if you've seen him in anything really. He was in like one of the Godzilla movies. I think you might have seen. But on Game of Thrones, he played Tywin Lannister, and he was terrifying. Actually, now that I think about it, like a lot of actors from Game of Thrones could probably work.
Yeah.
Well, maybe not all. I don't know if Kit Harington would be a great Master. But that would be interesting. If you want to go for more Game of Thrones, Sean Bean was, I mean, I don't know as the Master, but Sean Bean is just a lot of fun anyway. So yeah.
Call up Sir Ian McKellen.
Yeah.
For a one-time, I've come to end your life, Doctor.
Yeah, just even just for a one-time sort of thing, that could be interesting, and yeah, that would also be funny because I remember in the 5-ish Doctors reboot, they made a joke about Sylvester McCoy not being there for The Hobbit because he was trying to get into the 50th, and it cut to, was it Peter Jackson and Ian McKellen, and it's like, oh, Sylvester McCoy, he's not here, and Ian McKellen's like, well, I don't think he'll be missed. So yeah, that could be pretty funny. Yeah. So, there's our sort of castings for the Master. But yeah. Well, that's pretty much it. We've finished off the Q&A, which is good. The recording is at 2 hours and 42 minutes, so we should probably wrap up. You got anything else?
I got nothing.
All right. Now, next time, we are on to The Face of Evil. I believe that's a discount Zelda video game from the 90s. The Faces of Evil.
So we've had the Hand of Evil. We've had the Evil of the Daleks. Planet of Evil. And now The Face. Now The Face of Evil.
Eventually we're going to get the whole body. So, but yeah.
If they ever get to the kneecap of evil, we're out.
Yeah. Well, it'll be like on the Fairly Odd Parents when they had the bronze kneecap. So, that's an obscure Fairly Odd Parents reference. And with all that being said, we're Alex and Dad from 7th Hour Films, and we will see you guys next time. Take care. Alright guys, thanks for watching this video. There's a bunch of links on screen if you want to go click around any of those. There's a playlist for all of our Doctor Who classic reactions, as well as another video, mainly our original reaction to The Deadly Assassin if you want to go check those out. There's also a subscribe button and a Patreon button on screen, as well as other links in the description if you want to go check out any of those. See you guys later.